There is a generation that built the modern world and got absolutely no credit for it. No hashtags, no aesthetic, no cultural moment dedicated to them. Generation X. Born roughly between 1965 and 1980, they slipped right through the cracks between the boomers and the millennials. And most people don't even realize how psychologically fascinating they are. But psychology is starting to pay attention. Because the way Gen X was wired, quietly, without fanfare, is producing a type of mental resilience that younger generations are genuinely struggling to replicate. Let's start with the thing that shaped everything else. Gen X were the original latchkey kids. Not a few of them, millions of them. By the mid-1980s, researchers estimate that around 7 million children between the ages of 5 and 13 were regularly coming home to an empty house after school. Both parents working, no smartphone to call, no one checking in. You grabbed your key, let yourself in, made a sandwich, and figured out the rest of the afternoon on your own. And here's what that did to your brain. Psychologists call it early autonomy wiring. Your nervous system learned before it was supposed to that no one was coming to solve your problems. Not out of neglect, necessarily, out of necessity. And that lesson sank deep. It became the foundation of everything else about how Gen X operates in the world. But early autonomy alone doesn't explain the full picture. What made Gen X psychologically different was the combination of that independence with something else. Consequences that actually landed. When you stepped out of line in a Gen X household, nobody sat you down for a calm conversation about your feelings. The correction was immediate, it was direct, it was final. Researchers call this a high contingency environment, where actions and outcomes are linked without any buffer. Your brain learned to read a room in seconds, to calculate risk in real time, to think 3 steps ahead before you even opened your mouth. That's not cynicism. That's survival instinct, and then the world confirmed it. Gen X watched their parents preach stability while divorce rates climbed through the 70s and 80s. They watched people dedicate their entire careers to companies that handed them a pink slip without blinking. The message they got from every adult in their life was, work hard and everything will work out. And then everything didn't work out. Psychologists have a term for this. They call it defensive pessimism, but Gen X doesn't see it that way. They call it being realistic. It's not that they expect the worst, it's that they stop being surprised by it. And that distinction matters because it's what allowed them to build something rare. Emotional armor that doesn't actually stop them from functioning. It just makes them harder to knock down. Here's where it gets interesting. That emotional armor extended into how Gen X relates to other people, and it shows up in a way that confuses younger generations constantly. Gen X doesn't perform, they don't broadcast their struggles on social media. They don't ask for help, not because they're cold, because they grew up in an era where privacy was the default and vulnerability was something you kept behind closed doors. Think about it. When you made a mistake as a kid, maybe 5 people knew about it. It faded. It wasn't documented. It wasn't screenshotted and shared. The idea of putting your life on display for strangers didn't feel brave. It felt exposed. And that instinct never left. Research in the Journal of Adult Development found that Gen X adults report significantly lower levels of seeking social support during difficult periods. Not because they lack the people to turn to, because asking feels like losing ground. But don't mistake that silence for disconnection. This is the paradox at the heart of Gen X psychology. They are simultaneously the most independent and the most quietly loyal generation alive. They will never call and complain, they will never post about their struggles, but if someone they care about is in trouble, they show up. No announcement, no drama, just presence. This came from forming incredibly tight bonds with friends out of pure necessity. When your parents weren't emotionally available, your peers became everything. Those friendships were forged in unsupervised afternoons and weekend nights with no GPS and no safety net. And bonds made under those conditions don't break easily. Now here's the piece that explains so much about how Gen X actually functions in the workplace and in life. They don't trust institutions. They trust competence. If you've earned your position through genuine skill, they will respect you without question. If you hold a title but can't back it up, they have zero patience. This isn't rebellion for the sake of it. Gen X watched incompetent authority figures make catastrophic decisions their entire childhood. From political scandals to fumbled crises, the adults in charge kept failing publicly. So Gen X learned to judge people by what they could actually do. Not by what they said, not by their job title, by their ability to show up and get it done. and they brought that same standard to themselves. Gen X workers don't talk about hustle. They don't post motivational quotes. They just quietly become the most competent person in the room because they know something that generations raised on visibility and recognition are still figuring out. You can't control whether you get laid off. You can't control whether the economy shifts or the industry changes, but you can control whether you are the last person anyone would let go. That's not ambition. That's strategy. Built by a generation that learned the hard way that the ground beneath you can disappear overnight. So the next time you look at a Gen X person and wonder why they seem so calm when everything around them is falling apart, remember this. They've been practicing that calm since they were 8 years old. They didn't learn resilience from a self-help book or a wellness retreat. They learned it from empty houses and swift consequences and a world that kept changing the rules without warning. They're not broken. They're not bitter. They're just built different, shaped by a window in history that produced something the modern world desperately needs and has no idea how to recreate. If this resonated, hit subscribe.